Hello, welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic. Today is Friday. We're going to do a classic Sudoku today. This is coming from George. He says it's a good puzzle, so I don't think it's going to be monstrously hard, but he said yeah, it's a very nice solve, so we're going to have a go at that in a minute. A few things to mention that we've got coming up on the channel shortly. We have a video that I've made on the puzzle that sort of stumped even the world's best solvers at the recent World Sudoku Championship. So quite a brutal puzzle that Sam's recommended to us. So we're going to take a look at that. I've got an odd and even killer Sudoku to show you that Christoph Seeliger designed a few years ago that got a lot of plaudits at the time, but it's a very long video because it's a very hard puzzle. And we're going to do a video on the recent Dash tournament that happened all over the world. So it's different area, same hunt. It's a puzzle hunt that happens yeah, on a particular day worldwide, same puzzles but sort of different locations. And there was one puzzle in particular that appealed to my team. It had a really nice logic problem, actually combined with a bit of a crossword. So we're gonna show you that one as well. And also for every month, I should mention that we release extra content on Patreon. So for those of you who sponsor us on Patreon, and we're very grateful if you do that, it's a couple of bucks a month to access the extra content. And this month we've got a very good Sudoku which gives you some extra digits for, we think, the hardest sandwich Sudoku we've ever created. So those of you who've been enjoying our app, Sandwich Sudoku app that we released about a month ago, which has, you know, it's really had some wonderful feedback. Well, the puzzle that we've got for patrons this month is harder than anything in that app. So if you fancy yourself as a Sandwich Sudoku expert, I definitely would recommend getting access to it now. And for anyone who does it and finds it too difficult, of course, for $3 a month, you also get a video of Muggins here having to solve the puzzle. So yeah, anyone who is not a patron and could consider becoming a patron, it's massively appreciated. It really does help Mark and I out. Now let's turn our attention to this puzzle. If you want to have a go, click on the link under the video. That'll take you to our web page where you can have a look at this. There's actually some more stuff coming out too. Our website is very close to completion, and that's going to have some very interesting features that we think you'll like. We've also got a couple more apps in train. Excited about both of those, and I don't know when they'll be coming out yet, but it won't be too long. So let's have a look at this now. Ones. Now this is a normal Sudoku. Now I've been doing loads of variants recently, so it's actually quite nice to not have to worry about the shape of this grid being in a torus or knight's moves or anything else. In fact, I can write a 2 in at the top there because of these 3 2s dotted around. That locks a 2 in at the bottom. These 8s, they're going to lock an 8 into one of those squares, which means there's an 8 in one of these squares. Just so that you guys know, when I see this, I'm immediately looking around the grid for 8s to see if I can lock 8s into row 1 and 2 of the grid. So if, for example, this square was a 1, I would know that the 8 in this square would be in one of those 5 cells, and therefore I would know that the 8 in box 1 would have to be in row 3. Now, I don't know any of that, but that's the sort of thing I'm looking for. The other thing I note when I'm solving Sudoku, I don't know if this is a good thing or not, is I look for open flanks within. So if I look at this box, for example, you can see we've got this 3 and 2 sitting plainly on the side, and my eyes are drawn to the fact that in row or column 8 of the grid, I've not got either of those numbers placed. But of course, actually, this 2 and 3 are very powerful in relation to column 8 because we can't have a 2 or a 3 in any of those 3 squares. So again, I'm sort of looking here at these squares, and I'm scanning across to see whether or not 2s and 3s are eliminated from any of these rows. So imagine, just for the sake of argument, we've done some work on the grid and we've got a 2, 3 here as well. Then we'd immediately be able to identify that in column 8 the only squares that could contain 2s and 3s would be the yellow highlighted squares. So that's the other thing I'm seeing, or I'm trying, my eyes are drawn to as I solve Sudoku. So again, this 6, 8 here is a similar thing to this 2, 3, isn't it? So the 6s and the 8s have to be in those 3 squares there in column 5, and I don't think we can do anything with that. It's also interesting to note that the 1 and the 2 here, it's not as powerful, but just checking all of these sorts of things. Let's carry on with our pencil marks, because that's enough of me waffling on. Those 4s and these 2 squares. Twos can only be in these 2 positions in this central 3x3. And interestingly, 2s are quite restricted all round this grid, certainly in the bottom part of it. So 2s can only go into those 2 squares. Yeah, there is an X-wing there, so that's interesting. If we look here, you can see that the 2s are limited to exactly 2 columns within row 6 of the grid. That's this square and this square. I'll colour them in to make it clear. Now, if we zap down here, these 2s at the top of the grid, it's like they've been carefully positioned in order to rule out this square, this square, this square, and this square in row 7. So there's a similar thing going on. So there is an X-wing on 2s there. I don't want to start here because I haven't even finished pencil marking yet, but this is something we might come back to if we get stuck. So let's just carry on with our pencil marking. See how far that takes us. I say that, and now I'm not actually seeing. Maybe this is what I'm meant to see. Sorts of restrictions going on. This 3, 5, obviously, that has, you know, these 3 squares have got to be 3 and 5 in column 4. I'm sure I'm missing some trick like that. Let's take a look at this X-wing in a bit more detail and see if we can see if that leads anywhere. So let's just go through the logic. We've locked the 2s into exactly 2 positions in row 6 and exactly 2 positions in row 7. Now what does this mean? That means in the final solution, when we look at the final solution, let's imagine we saw a 2 here. There's either going to be a 2 here or 2 here. That's absolutely forced. Now if the 2 was here, then because the 2s are limited to exactly the same columns in row 7, there would have to be a 2 here as well. So the one possibility when we look at the solution is that there's a 2 here and a 2 here. Now the only other state that we could find when we look at the solution is instead there's a 2 here and a 2 here. And it's this sort of X shape, if I draw a line slowly with the cursor, that way and then that way, that gives the X-wing its name. And what an X-wing means is that we can now, by restricting the positions of the 2s in the rows, we can eliminate 2s from the columns. There cannot be 2s in any of those squares. And that should be clear because we know in the finished grid there's either a 2 here and a 2 here, or there's a 2 here and a 2 here. So it's just impossible that any of the yellow squares can contain 2's. Now you can see immediately that several squares here are not very interesting because we could have eliminated 2's anyway. There's a 2 in this box, there's a 2 in this box, and there's a 2 here. So in fact, the only squares the X-wing affects directly are those squares. So these are the ones that I suggest we look at. In fact, these 2 squares are seriously restricted. Yeah, this is a clever puzzle, actually. This is a clever puzzle because I don't know what the origin of this puzzle is, but this does not feel to me like a puzzle that is a machine-generated puzzle. Now, why do I say that? It's because I only managed to put 1 digit into the grid using any sort of standard technique, and then we arrived at this pattern, which seemed a bit difficult, but with lots of linkages going on across the grid. And now look how carefully this has been constructed, because this X-wing on 2's and the positions of these 4's is incredible, because now when we look down column 5 of the grid, these 2 yellow squares, what can they be? Well, they can be 1's, they can't be 2's because of the X-wing, they can't be 3's, they can't be 4's because of these carefully positioned 4's, they can't be 5, 6, they can be 7, and they can't be 9. So the X-wing means these 2 squares are a 1 and a 7. Now, let's think about what that does. There's a few things I think it's going to do. So now we need these 2 squares up here. Can't be 2, so they have to be 4, 6, or 8. No. 7's here though, and this 7, I mean there must be a 7 at the top, so let's put that in. Now we are going to get somewhere, because these 3 7's now force a 7 into this square. And the moment I place this 7, I took the position of a 1, so I get a 1 as well. These 7's mean there's a 7 here. 7's over on that side of the grid now. This 8 has suddenly become more powerful. I looked at these 8's earlier. Now this has to be an 8. Therefore this is an 8. Oops. Now there must be 8's in one of these 2 squares. Six cannot go in any of those positions in that box there because of these 6's. So there must be a 6 into this square, which means there's a 6 into this square as well. Oops, 6 here. Now over here we need 4, 5 and 9 to complete this box. So we can do a bit of elimination here. We can say 4's must be in one of those squares. 9's must be at the top there. So there's a 9 over here. And in this square we still need 3, 4 and 5. And you can see we've got 3's here and here. So that's a 3, that's a 3, this is a 5 and this is a 4. That's because of this 5 here disambiguating everything. Now the 4 here means this is a 4. I think we might have cracked this now. I don't want to speak too soon, but this definitely feels like we're making good progress all of a sudden. We get 1, 4, 9 into these 3 squares, just completing row 2 of the grid. That means we must need 5 and 8 into those 2 squares, and you can see there's a 5 down here. So 5, 8, 5 into one of these 2 positions. Now if you are spotting sixes here, 6 and 6 means this square must be a 6. Now the moment I place this 6, I'm interfering with the x-wing in a very useful way. So now I can immediately go 2, 2, because I know that one of the limbs of the x, either this one or this one, must be true. So the moment I get a 6 disturbing the x-wing, I can fill in the other two diagonals. Now that must be a 2 as well. Must be a 2 in one of these squares. I'm actually going to remove all of this colour because that's going to confuse me. I am easily confused. 3, 3, 5, 9. This is a 9 here because we've already got a 3 and a 5 in the box. This must be 3, 5 here. That should be a 4, I think, to complete the column. There's lots of 4 into one of these two squares. That one up there can't be a 4. And these three squares should be 1 and 9 we need as well. So we can pencil mark 1s. I'm actually going to fully pencil mark that with 9s as well, just to avoid having to think about it and remember. Right. So if we look at row 5 of the grid, 5, 6, 8 and 9 to place, well, we've got a 5, 6 and an 8 already in column 1, so that square's a 9. Now this 9 here sees that square. Now that must now be an 8, I suppose. So this is a 5, 6 pair now going across the central row of the grid. Now 6s are a little bit interesting in terms of this block. Look, we're able to lock a 6 into one of two positions. That means one of those two squares is a 6. Now once we interact that with this 6, you can see I'm going to be able to place a 6 at the top there. That takes the position of a 1, so I get a 1 as well. This 6, and this 6 interact, and that forces a 6 into this square. This 1 resolves the 1 and the 7. These 7s force a 7 here, and you can see the puzzle is really starting to yield now. The square must be a 3 or a 5 just to complete the row. Must be a 3 in one of these two squares because of the 3 at the top. Oops, a 1 in one of these two squares. An 8 in one of these two squares. And the only number I don't think we know enough about yet is 9. We probably know enough about it, but I'm just not seeing how to use it. So maybe we'll come back to that in a second. 5, 9. Yes, 9 would be a good number to get more of, actually. 6. So with 3. Now this square and this square, they're a 5, 9 pair, just to complete this column. And then this square, look, we can actually place the 4. That's not a 4 anymore. That's a 5 or a 9 as well. This is a 3 or a 9. This is a 3, 5 or a 9. 1, 9. What are we missing here? There must be an easy way of finishing this from here, I would think. 6s. Ah, 3s. These 3s are interacting nicely and eliminating 3s from those two squares. So that locks a 3 up there. That locks a 3 into one of these two positions. Now, if we interact that 3, these 3s here that I've just pencil marked with the pencil mark 3s, that's something that's easy to miss. Pencil marked, checking your pencil marks when you put in a new pencil mark is something that it's quite easy to overlook. Now this must be a 1, and you can see now I think we are there. So 1, 1. We finally get another 9 in the grid. That's going to lock a 9, 9, 5 over here. This square here now must be a 5 to complete the row, and that locks the 6 and the 5 into position. That locks the 3s and the 5s at the bottom. This 3 forces a 3 and a 1 there. We still need to put, oops, I don't want to do that. I want to put a 9 into one of these two squares. And this one's going to unwind everything. 1, 9, 8. 8 here. 5 and 9 into these two squares. 9, and that should be a... no, I don't want a 9 in there. I want 3 and 6, I think. 6 and 3, and check. And that's how to do it. So, a very interesting puzzle, that. Let me know how you got on with it. We do really appreciate your feedback on the videos, so always interested in that. And we'll be back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic. And do check out the Patreon puzzles. As I say, once a month these come out, and you know, we spend a lot of time making them for you. And I think you'll like this month's very much. See you soon.